I should have never answered that whistle. The air that night was thick, humid, clinging to my skin like a second layer. A strange stillness had settled over the jungle, as if the entire island was holding its breath. And then, cutting through the silence, came that whistle. A long, slow note, rising and falling like a voice calling out in the dark. I was warned. The elders always said, if you hear a whistle in the dark, never respond. But I was stubborn, and I thought it was just another superstition. That was before I spent a night alone on Maraho Island, before I saw what was lurking in the shadows. It started as a solo trip, an escape from the noise of the city. The untouched nature, the dense Amazonian forest, the quiet rivers, I thought it would be peaceful. I rented a small cabin near the edge of the island, just a few minutes from the water. The locals were friendly, but there was always a strange tension when I told them I was staying alone. They would nod, but their smiles faded. One old fisherman pulled me aside before I left the village. His voice was low, almost fearful. He looked around as if making sure no one else was listening. Listen, if you hear a whistle at night, don't whistle back. No matter what. His fingers gripped my arm, his nails digging slightly into my skin. I laughed it off. A local legend, nothing more. But the look in his eyes haunted me as I walked away. The way his expression shifted from concern to something closer to regret. My first night was calm. The only sounds were the chirping of insects and the distant waves against the shore. I sat by the campfire, enjoying the solitude, the scent of burning wood filling the humid air. The flames flickered, casting long shadows on the trees that surrounded the clearing. But then, around midnight, I heard it. A whistle. Faint, but unmistakable. A single, eerie note drifting through the trees, carried by the breeze. At first, I thought it was another traveler or maybe a local playing a trick. So, without thinking, I whistled back. Silence. The air felt heavy, unnaturally still, as if the entire jungle had stopped breathing. Even the insects had gone quiet, leaving behind a void of sound that made my skin crawl. Then, a few seconds later, the whistle returned. This time, closer. A cold wave of dread washed over me. I scanned the darkness, but there was nothing. No movement, no footsteps, just the dense jungle staring back at me. The fire flickered suddenly, as if an unseen hand had passed over it. I shook it off and went inside, locking the door. Maybe it was just the wind, I told myself. Maybe. The second night was different. It started the same calm, peaceful. But at exactly midnight, the whistle returned. Closer, louder. I didn't whistle back this time, but something else did. From deep within the jungle, a low, guttural whistle responded. Not human, not natural. It echoed unnaturally, bouncing between the trees as if it were circling me, moving closer with each repetition. Then I heard footsteps, slow, deliberate, crunching through the leaves just outside my cabin. My heart pounded as I grabbed my flashlight and pointed it toward the door. Nothing. Then the door handle moved. Slowly at first, the faintest metallic creak breaking the silence, as if whoever or whatever was on the other side was testing it. Then suddenly a sharp rattle, the handle twisting violently as if something was desperately trying to force its way in. The wooden frame groaned under the pressure. I backed away, barely breathing. The whistle sounded again right outside my window. Summoning every ounce of courage, I reached for my camera and slowly inched toward the window. I had to see what it was. I had to know. I lifted the curtain. And there, standing in the moonlight, was a figure. Tall, thin. Its eyes, two burning red orbs in the dark. Its mouth stretched open, unnaturally, as if dislocated, and from its throat came that same eerie whistle, now deafeningly loud. The sound seemed to vibrate in my bones, making my vision blur. I stumbled backward, knocking over a chair. My breath hitched as the thing turned its head toward me, its movements jerky, unnatural, as though its bones didn't fit together quite right. The door creaked, the handle twisting violently. I ran, out the back door, into the jungle. Branches tore at my skin as I sprinted blindly through the trees. The whistle followed me, echoing in my ears, growing impossibly loud. Then, suddenly, silence. The whistle seemed to hang in the air, its last echoes dissolving into the night. My breath was ragged, each inhale sharp and unsteady. The jungle felt like it was holding its breath along with me, waiting, watching. The trees swayed slightly, though there was no wind. I woke up on the shore, my clothes damp with morning dew. My cabin was gone, or rather, it was there but abandoned, old, as if no one had lived in it for years. The wood was cracked, covered in moss. The fire pit was nothing but cold ash, as though it hadn't been used in decades. The villagers found me hours later. I tried to explain, but they only exchanged knowing looks. One of them finally spoke. "You whistled back, didn't you?" His voice carried no surprise, only pity. I left Marho Island that same day. I never went back, but even now, sometimes in the dead of night, I still hear it. A whistle in the dark. I thought we were alone on that ship. We had just found an abandoned boat drifting near the Ilha do Medo. No signs of life, no distress calls, just an empty deck and a cabin door swinging open with the wind. But we were wrong. We were never alone. It was supposed to be a routine fishing trip. The waters around Ilha do Medo were known for their rich marine life, but also for the stories. Stories of ships disappearing, of ghostly figures seen through the mist. That morning, we spotted something strange in the distance, an old vessel, slowly drifting, no signs of movement on board. We called out, no response, no flags, no distress signals, just a lifeless hulk rocking with the waves. The paint was peeling, the name of the ship faded beyond recognition. A sense of unease settled over us as we circled it, searching for any sign of what had happened. Curiosity got the best of us. We decided to board. The deck was covered in salt and grime, the ropes frayed as if they had been abandoned for years. But that didn't make sense. The hull was intact. The food in the galley was fresh. A pot of coffee sat half drunk on the table, as if someone had just been there. It was as if the crew had simply vanished moments ago. I stepped into the captain's quarters, the floor creaking beneath my boots. That's when I noticed it a journal left open on the table, the ink still fresh. The last entry read, "The whispers are back. The sea is calling. We are not alone." My heart pounded as a gust of wind slammed the cabin door shut behind me. We should have left then and there, but something kept us searching, as if we were drawn deeper into the mystery. Then we heard it. A low murmur, almost like a conversation just beyond our reach. It was coming from below deck. The sound was distant yet unmistakable, as if multiple voices whispered in an eerie harmony. A rhythmic pattern, rising and falling, as though someone was responding. Cautiously, we descended. The air was thick, damp, carrying the unmistakable scent of seawater and something else, something rotting. Our flashlight beams cut through the darkness, revealing empty bunks, untouched equipment, but no sign of life. The walls were scratched, long, uneven marks gouged into the wood as if something had clawed at them. There were symbols carved into the beams, spirals and sigils I had never seen before. Then, out of nowhere, the ship lurched. A deep groan echoed through the hull, as if something massive had stirred beneath the waves. The whispers grew louder, circling us, slipping through the cracks of the wooden planks. A shadow moved at the far end of the corridor. Not a man, not something human. A dark silhouette, impossibly tall, standing motionless before slowly disappearing behind a door that creaked open on its own. I turned to run, but the ship moved again this time, against the current. The realization hit me like a wave. The ship wasn't drifting, it was being pulled. Then the whispers turned to voices, a single word repeating over and over again, "Join us." A shiver ran down my spine as I grabbed my friend's arm, urging him to move. but he was frozen in place. His eyes were locked on something in the darkness, his lips trembling. "They're here," he muttered, and then he screamed. A shape emerged from the shadow stall, gaunt, with hollow, glowing eyes. Its fingers stretched unnaturally long, curling as if reaching for us. My friend bolted, stumbling as he scrambled up the stairs. I followed, but as I turned for one last look, the figure stepped forward. Its face was wrung too smooth, as if the skin had been stretched over something hollow beneath. The mouth opened, and a rush of cold air filled the cabin, carrying the scent of decay and salt. Panic surged through me. We stumbled back onto the deck, but the sea had changed. The mist was closing in, swallowing the horizon, and with it our escape route. The ship groaned beneath us, rocking violently. The water, once calm, churned like a beast waking from slumber. We rushed to the lifeboat, hands trembling as we cut the ropes. The ship groaned again, something massive moving beneath it. As we rowed away, I dared to look back. The vessel was sinking, disappearing into the depths as if it had never been there. And just before it vanished, I saw them. Figures standing at the railing, watching us. Their hollow eyes gleaming in the dark, their mouths open as if whispering, but no sound reached us. One of them lifted a skeletal hand and pointed directly at me. The water around them churned as though something was rising from below. We made it back to shore, but the nightmares never left. To this day, I hear the whispers when the wind howls through my window, and sometimes when I close my eyes, I still see them watching, and I fear that one day they will call me back.